Welcome to episode 170 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. Today, we're going to be discussing skiing in Roccaraso in the Italian Apennine Mountains, La Plagne, and further afield, take a look at skiing in Japan. Now, my name is Iain Martin. I'd like to introduce my guest today. I'm delighted to have with us, I think for her third time on the podcast, I'm not really too sure, is Jen Tsang, based out in La Plagne. How are you today, Jen?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. It's great to be here again.
Is there possibly some snow falling out the window?
Sadly not, no. It did start falling yesterday, and I was hoping that it was going to be set in because it looked like really good snowfall, but it died off quite quickly, and the sun has come back out again today. But the clouds are still circling, and it is on the forecast.
Okay. Well, that's good. Also with us today, we have a regular on the show, Mike Richards. I think he was last on in episode 165 when we were discussing Madesimo. And today you're joining us from Japan, Mike.
Hi, Ian. Great to be back on the show. Coming to you live from Niseko in Hokkaido in northern Japan.
Excellent. Is there any snow out your window? I think it's probably 7 o'clock in the evening by now, isn't it?
It's 7 o'clock in the evening, but you can see it in the street lights. We've had about a meter in the last week.
Making us very jealous. Right. Well, question I always ask my guests is, when did you last ski or snowboard? Given that you're both living in ski resorts, I'm imagining it's very recent. But go on, Jen, tell us when you were last out on snow.
Yeah, yesterday. So I went out for a quick run yesterday. I've been sticking to the lunchtime slots because it's been so busy with like the February half-term holidays. But I went out earlier yesterday and I just hit massive queues, like 10 or 15-minute queues. So I just did one quick run and headed home. And actually, the piste was still pretty empty once I was up there and riding. It was just the queuing to get up there, which took the edge off it. But the lunchtime spots have been really quiet, like empty piste, no queue, straight onto chairlifts.
Okay, and just to clarify then, that queue that you're talking about to get up on the mountain, where is that from and to? I can't recall which bit of La Plagne you live in.
So I was in Plagne Centre. So I dropped my kids off at judo, and then I run in my ski gear up to the Grand Rochette bubble lift, which is right in the middle of Plagne Centre. So it is really one of the feeder lifts where you're going to get everywhere else. And I just hit it at the same time as all the ski school drop-offs and things. So it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. So it was peak busy time. Okay.
Interesting. And Mike, I'm guessing you were maybe skiing today, perhaps in your time.
Yes, I was. Had a fabulous morning in Niseko area. I don't ski locally a lot, but I went to the peak and it was great snow.
Cool. Right. Well, you make us very jealous. We'll come back on to Japan later on. I have got a couple of snow reports from different people that we're going to drop in now. We've got one from Andy Butterworth from Kaluma Ski in St Anton. Also, Dave Burrows from out in Switzerland and out and about. So let's have a listen to those.
Hi Ian, hi everyone. It's Andy in St Anton with a mid-season update. I say update rather than snow report, as there's not that much snow to actually report on. Technically, that's a lie. What we do have is great. There's just not that much of it. If I look at it as a season as a whole so far, in a comparison to last season, it's not really comparable. We don't have as much snow. Last winter, from my memory, we had a great December and a really good bumper January. We just haven't had that great December or bumper January this year going into 2023. Into February, and if I remember everything correctly, last year, if I get my dates right, we had really warm weather and the Sahara Sands, certainly coinciding with the UK half-term. I remember everything being this beautiful red glow over the mountains as the Sahara Sand dumped this sort of red mist of sand over the whole of the Arlberg region and indeed most of the Alps, which was quite spectacular to look at, but not great for the snow. It warmed everything up and it definitely helped with the melting of the snow in February. We haven't had the Sahara Sands this year, but we've had Sahara-like weather. It's been up in the sort of like plus 10s and above on the mountain, which hasn't been ideal. It kind of makes it spring skiing in the middle of February. So if you like long morning skiing, long lunches on a sun terrace, it's the perfect weather for you. Ideal skiing, in fact. If you come for a week's holiday or a weekend's holiday, as many of the guests over here seem to be doing these days, there's definitely enough to ski on. great mornings, well-prepared piece, lovely, firm in the morning, freezing overnight, but does get a bit slushy by sort of like mid-afternoon, making the home runs a little bit tricky. That's not to say the skiing isn't great. Certainly some of the touring and the backcountry stuff is fantastic. More sort of like fern snow, which is the spring snow that we're kind of used to over here in the Austrian side of the Alps, which is just when the sun sort of hits the snow and starts warming it up, sort of late morning time. It becomes that sort of like soft on top but crunchy underneath. And if you're willing to put the skins on and go for a tour or a boot pack and hike somewhere, you can still find some really nice skiing. The worry, of course, for everyone is what it might be like at Easter. But again, if I compare back to last year, we didn't have that much snow forecast or indeed dumped at all in February 2022. But it did dump at the end of February and going into March, which set us up nicely for the rest of the season. There isn't a great deal of snow on the forecast going ahead, but what there is enough to certainly give itself a nice covering, make everything white again, and certainly lift the mood for everyone coming out, in March and towards Easter time. Bookings across the whole season have been really good. People have been really happy. The resort's been really busy, especially at the moment, which is into the Austrian sort of Fasching, the carnival time. Resort is really jumping, really pumping. Slopes are pretty busy. And everyone seems to be enjoying themselves and skiing what there is to ski at the moment. Everything's open. The whole of the Arlberg is thriving. Everyone seems happy. We would just be happier if there was a big dump on the forecast and there's a bit more snow coming into March. But as it goes, season of the whole has been really good. Been some great skiing and been some lovely weather. So long may that continue. Hope everyone's well, and we hope to see you on the slopes sometime soon. Cheers.
Hi Ian, it's Dave Burrows from Snow Pro Ski School. Hope you're all doing well out there in ski podcast land. Listen to this. That is the sound of rain falling on the top of my house. And outside, there is like clouds and everything. And for once, in like the last, must be at least a month, I can't see completely blue sky and no clouds. It's absolutely extraordinary. I know for a fact, so I live here at like about 900 meters. I know for a fact that it's already snowing a bit higher. And this is, wow. It's extraordinary. I haven't seen the sky like this for ages. I've been enjoying, I've been skiing in Villars, I've been skiing in the Porte du Soleil on the Swiss side, and I've been enjoying some of the best sort of piste conditions that we've had for ages. And we've been really lucky with this kind of period of sort of massive high pressure that's just been sitting over us for such a long time that the temperatures have really, really been cold. So I'm looking out over the valley now, and it's still on the north side. It's still sort of a bit snowy. On the south side where I am, it's all a little bit green, but yeah, I mean the conditions are amazing, and I think that's the biggest change over the last 10 years is how the ski resorts have sort of managed the snow. So even when we get periods like this, the pistes are still in really good condition. What's the matter, Kat? What are you doing? Are you making a special guest appearance on the podcast? Huh? No? It's run off. Miserable cat. Anyway, no special guests from me this week, but just to let you know, the conditions have been absolutely brilliant here. All right, there isn't much sort of off-piste skiing to be had, that kind of thing, but the piste conditions have been great, and there is still plenty of snow on the piste, despite what you might hear. Conditions are certainly good enough for the vast majority of people that visit the region. So there you go. I'm going to continue to look out the window and see what comes down, and yeah, maybe you'll hear from me in a couple of weeks. I'm off to Lathwil in the Aosta Valley, I think next week or the week after, so maybe you'll hear from me from there as well. But no guest stars from me this week, just my cat and the noise of the rain on the roof. I hope you're all well. Keep up the great work, Ian, as usual, and I will see you soon. Bye.
Great, so that was really interesting to listen to those. And Jen, just tell us, what are the pistes like? What's your snow report for La Plagne just now? Because there hasn't been snow for quite a while now.
No, so we haven't had snow since that really big fall. We had, early January, mid-January. And since then, apart from yesterday when the clouds rolled in, I think it's been blue skies and clear weather non-stop. The difference being throughout January and early Feb, it was freezing cold. So really, really cold, like -10 or so. And then in the last in the last week, the last 10 days, bang on half-term peak season, the temperatures just skyrocketed and it's been a lot warmer here. So the peaks are actually in amazing condition, considering that we haven't had snowfall for now coming up to a month, and that it's been so warm, combined with peak season skiing in the last week.
And when you had those cold temperatures, were the cannons on? Were they creating extra snow?
No, so I think it's been an active decision to not use the snow cannons because they are trying to conserve the water levels in the reservoirs and also the energy efficiency as well. They are making a drive to kind of reduce energy consumption. And so the cannons haven't been running. Has that been the same across the other resorts as well in the area?
Yeah, interesting. Although the temperatures have been very low, I mean, it was a really decent snowfall at that period. And it's a big decision by ski resorts whether to put those cannons on or not. And just because the temperatures are low, typically they put them on, early season, and they would have done normally at the start of this season if the temperatures had been low enough. Obviously, we had that kind of flip. They were extremely warm in the autumn and in mid-December, and then extremely cold in January. But you're right. I'm trying to remember that word that they have in French for the energy conservation. I think it's sobriety, isn't it? They've got they call it sobriety. I've seen it mentioned in a number of places. The idea that overall as a nation, France is trying to reduce electricity use by about 10% or energy use by about 10% through this winter.
I think it will be interesting to see where they end up at the end of the winter as a resort as a whole. I know in the last month, or in the last week, that a lot of the chalet companies here and hotel owners have started getting their first energy bills through since the crisis, I say started, but, became a big talking point. And their bills have absolutely skyrocketed in some cases. So it will be interesting to see where the resorts fall out. The Plagne is quite interesting because we have a biomass chimney as well in Plagne Centre. I can actually see from my window here, and that provides a huge amount of the energy for the resort. I forget the actual percentage, but we do use that for running a lot of the buildings and the chairlifts and things in resorts. So I'm hoping, or I'm interested to see how that does actually offset the usage across the whole resort.
Right. I mean, that is interesting. Biomass has, how can I put it, like mixed reports. It depends very much on exactly, what the wood chip or whatever it is that people are using and how that's sourced, because there are obviously, emissions related to it. But that's it. That's interesting. And, we're talking about effectively all issues to do with climate change. What the interesting thing recently is that it's not been, early in the season, the issue was that there was precipitation, but it was too warm for it to be snow and we had loads of rain. Now we haven't had precipitation in the Northern Hemisphere, in Europe anyway. In the States, they're obviously having lots of snow. And, whether the consequences of climate change are complicated. When you were last on the show, Jen, you were telling us about some of the changes that the resort was planning for higher up. For the benefit of listeners who didn't listen to that episode, you just want to remind us what those changes are up on the glacier and the lifts that are concerned.
Yeah, so Le Plagne, obviously, we've got a glacier here, and that reaches at the moment up to like 3,200 meters. But this is the last year that we will have the same setup up there. And they are actually, what they're calling it is rewilding the glacier. So up at the top of the Le Plagne peaks, we've got two glaciers. You've got the Chope Glacier and the Belcotte Glacier. And the Chope Glacier is the higher one. And they are stopping the skiing on there, removing all the pylons, removing all the chairlifts and things, and redirecting the skiing towards the Belcotte Glacier. And so the peak will still be above 3,000 meters, which I think is like the what do you call it, like bragging rights, as it were, that we've still got skiing above 3,000 meters, but it will be on this different glacier and it will be slightly lower. And they are using sustainability as a reason for doing this and being more climate aware and climate friendly. But I do also think it's quite a savvy, maybe, business decision, because the glacier is melting and we saw big avalanches through the summer of the permafrost. And so the glacier, it's not going to be able to be skiable in the same way in the future.
Yeah, and you mentioned to me when we were chatting in the green room before the podcast that you were up there recently and you could see some of that change yourself.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. I went up. I don't go up there that often because it is quite a long journey to get all the way up there. But we had family in resorts, so we headed up, especially because it is changing. And it was quite shocking how hot it was up there. So this was last week, so maybe like the 15th or 16th of Feb. And it was incredibly warm up there, as in taking off your hat, taking off your ski jacket. It was warm, which it really just shouldn't be at 3,200 meters in February. And you could see that wet sheen on the snow where it's really kind of glistening and you can see the melt. And there were quite a few cracks off the pistes of the snow conditions as well. So it was quite shocking to see how much melt there was up there for kind of mid-February of a season when we still technically have half of the season to go.
Yeah, well, one of the points that you make there, and I've been thinking about this week, is that you said that the piste, in La Plagne are in pretty good condition, considering there hasn't been any snow for over a month now. And, hopefully there will be some snow to come shortly. But what I'm thinking about already is the summer, because last summer, the amount of summer skiing in the Alps was reduced significantly. Places that never closed, like Zermatt, closed, and other places like Val d'Isère didn't even open at all, and Tignes and Les Deux Alpes have very short seasons. And one of the reasons for that was to do with the high temperatures. But another reason was there wasn't a very good snowfall in the previous season. That must have been 21-22. Now, I'm looking at this season thinking, right, historic snowfall is got to be, relatively low. And that already suggests to me that we could have a continuing problem with summer skiing in the Alps for the summer of 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this conversation must be being had in all the resorts when they're looking towards this summer, because at some point the decision will have to be made as to whether the glaciers will open, or what date they will open, or will it be open to a specific group of people, like just for training and not to the public, and the things that we saw happening last winter, because that needs to start being communicated to people sooner rather than later. Because as a business owner out here as well, there's so many small and independent businesses and ski schools and operators that need to know how and what they'll be operating this coming summer. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, it is a complex issue, and there are all sorts of, that conversation about sustainability, climate change, continues the whole time. I have blogged about this on Ski Flight Free or elsewhere, but we just had the World Championships in Courchevel and Méribel, and one of the most interesting things to me that came out of that was the athletes competing in FIS races. Now, over 400 of them have signed an open letter to FIS asking them to take more action in relation to how that World Cup and World Championship circuit is organised. One of the things they point out is that currently, the circuit starts really early in the autumn. And a whole bunch of those races were actually cancelled this year. Soldum 1 and the 2 was cancelled. Zermatt was cancelled. Adelboden, when they did start, with just a strip of snow. So one of the things they're suggesting is to shift the calendar so it starts later and finishes later, because there is actually snow. And another thing they're suggesting is, instead of having events in the States, in North America, then coming to Europe, then going back to North America again. I mean, that's ridiculous, because it's adding in loads of extra flights, and they could easily reorganize the schedule. So a lot for FIS to think about there. And, athletes who are taking part in the World Cup circuit obviously have a huge carbon footprint, because they're flying around the whole time. And I imagine what their excess baggage, probably is. However, that is their job. And we certainly accept that it's not always as straightforward as simply, the flights. Although, research has shown that if you're British and you go on a ski holiday, around 60 to 80% of the carbon footprint of your holiday is in the flight. But anyway, Jen, that's very interesting to talk to you, and I think we'll probably check in the summer and see what happens in relation to the glacier as well. But if it's all right, we're going to move on to Mike now, who is in Japan. one of the places that's on my bucket list. I don't tend to fly so much. I definitely would love to go skiing in Japan one day. So I have to work out how to get that into my personal carbon budget. But you're based in Niseko at the moment, which is in Hokkaido. Is that correct?
That's right. It's in the very northern island of the chain of islands in Japan. And we're in the southwest corner.
Right, southwest. I did actually look it up on the map earlier, so I've got an idea of that. And just why are you there? I mean, I know that you've gone there for many years, and COVID and the various rules after COVID put a blank on that. But what's your connection to that area?
I came here just as a ski instructor in 2006, 2007 season, and just saw the potential and saw how good it was. So I've returned every year with the exception of COVID.
That's brilliant. How are there any kind of working visa issues, or can you just because I'm a British person, just go to Japan and work just like that?
If you're under 30, you can get a working holiday visa like you can get for Australia or Canada. But if you're over 30, then you have to show, for my particular field ski instructor, you have to show 3 years worth of experience. But that's a tough one because it's actually, you have to show 3 full years. So it's 36 months worth of experience, which is roughly for most people about 7 or 8 winters.
Right. Okay. Well, you've been going out there for many years. I think you said 2007. So taking out a couple or so for COVID, that's about 15 years worth of skiing in Japan now, which is going to make everyone jealous because we've touched on this before. There's something about the snow in Japan known as Japao. Do you want to give us a kind of feeling for why it's special there?
It's threefold. It's a triangle of consistency, quality, and quantity. The quantity, we get about 12 to 13 meters of snowfall at the base area each and every winter. And then the quality is light, dry powder snow for most of the time. And but the big factor, and that's why I keep coming back, is the consistency so that people can book 6 to 12 months in advance, knowing that when they come in a 7 to 14 day period, they're going to have significant snowfall during their visit.
Yeah, to me, I mean that appeals hugely because I do get to the Alps quite a lot. I get a good amount of skiing in relative to most people, but it's patchy. I can't guarantee I'm going to get a good snow, and I rarely get the opportunity to ski powder. And what kind of dates would you suggest for Japan for people visiting from the UK or Australia or the States?
The peak season is December and January. That's when we get in snowfall almost every day. And then in February, we get about 4 to 5 days worth of snowfall. And then in March, it's down to 2 to 3. Excellent.
Okay. And you're in Niseko, but you don't always ski there. And one of the resorts that we discussed is Rusutsu. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're right. There are a number of resorts in the area, and my customers have been coming for a long time as well. So we're looking for variety, and we're looking for the best conditions that particular day. So Rusutsu is very much on that pathway for me.
And what is it about Rusutsu that makes it appealing?
It's not as big as in terms of vertical as the Niseko resort area, but it's quite a long resort. So the runs themselves are over a couple of kilometers. 2 to 3 kilometers per run, which when you're trying to transition from the piste to the fringe skiing and well-gladed trees, then you can have a long run to get into it.
And can I ask you another question? Like in relation to Japan, I was recently reading some posts by Lucy Aston from the Telegraph, who's been out there. And she was talking about the sort of politeness and the service that you get. And one of the things she said is that I think for getting on some of the lifts, the actual lifties carry your skis for you. Does that really happen?
In some resorts, yes, because they know that it's going to be a quicker job for them to load the gondola cars, especially. Some of them have been retrofitted for the newer shaped skis, twin tips or wider models, so they know that they're doing that on a daily basis, so they can do it far quicker.
Right. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. And how are lift tickets price wise? Are they kind of more expensive than Europe, less expensive than the States, something like that?
In the mid part, resorts like the Niseko resort area and Rusutsu, they're about £50 per person per day for a day ticket. But if you go to some of the smaller resorts, it goes down to £20 to £30, so comparable to some of the smaller resorts in Europe.
Right. Okay. And what about on the mountain? Mountain restaurants, are they kind of similar to skiing elsewhere?
There's restaurants at the base, restaurants at the top of the mountain or some of the mountains, and quite a variety of food, predominantly Japanese, where you can have ramen, which is like a noodle dish, or you can have rice dishes with vegetables and meat. And then there's burgers and pizzas and those kinds of things as well for the international market. And the prices are around for a main meal, where you'd have the main meal and soup. You'd look at about £15.
Right. Okay. I also read in Lucy's article, there's a lot of vending machines that will sell you food and hot food as well. Is that something you commonly see?
Yeah, food, hot drinks and food. You can get stuff in vending machines, but to be honest, you're better off having it from the restaurants themselves. They're more substantial in size.
Right. Okay. And so you mentioned you're based in Niseko. You've been to Rusutsu. What about other road trips around Hokkaido? Are there other resorts that you would recommend for someone who's going on a maybe a 2-week trip?
Yeah, in our area, in the southwest of Hokkaido, you've got the Niseko resort area is the main one. Then you've got Rusutsu, Kiroro, and then there's a whole gang of resorts that are in or near Sapporo, the city, the capital city, Sapporo Tene, and then you've got Otaru Tenguyama and Sapporo Kokusai. And then where people tend to go then is to the central area of Hokkaido, to an area called Furano. And from Furano, using that town as a base, you've got Furano itself, and then a number of different resorts like Tamamu and Kamui, which are resorts. And then the big one then is Asahedake, which is a backcountry resort that's lift accessed. Okay.
So if you wanted to go out there and you don't want to queue and you want to ski that Japao, the whole time and just do laps, what would your top recommendation be?
At the moment, I would say Rusutsu and Kiroro in my area, because they don't have the same bed base that the Niseko resort area has, or come out later. Don't come out in the December and January period. And if you come out in February and March, you'll still get great snow. You'll have the potential for having sunshine as well as snowfall, and there'll be a lot less people.
Right. Okay. And part of that is because, in that earlier period is when it's vacation time in Australia. Like there's a lot of Australians in that area. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And also the newer markets coming in, which is Southeast Asia. Singapore has their big holiday and New Year falls. Then you'll have the Hong Kong, mainland China, Taiwan, those kind of groups coming in to celebrate Chinese New Year in and around the snow resort.
Cool. Okay. Well, I mean, that's really interesting. We could do a whole episode on Japan and go into it in more detail, and maybe we will, in a future podcast. But for now, that's brilliant, Mike. Thank you so much for that. Right, that was really interesting listening to that. Now, regular listeners will know that Mike has appeared with me on the panel at the National Snow Show in Birmingham, where we talked about going off the beaten track. And I kind of went off the beaten track myself this February half term, because I went with my family to a resort called Roccaraso in Italy. Now, it's unusual in the fact that it is not in the Alps. It's actually in a mountain range called the Appenines that run down the middle of Italy. And consequently, the places to fly into are either Rome or Naples. And we flew into Naples. And really a good trip. One of the reasons I chose it, apart from the fact I thought it would be interesting to go somewhere, off the beaten track, is that, regular listeners might know my kids have got their GCSE year this year. So April didn't fit in and it's very expensive to go skiing in February half term. And you tend to get massive queues over in France. And this was a good kind of compromise in between. We actually did 4 days skiing in Roccaraso. But we also, had a look at Naples. We managed to go to Pompeii as well, which is, literally just down the road from Naples. And Roccaraso is a 2-hour drive from Naples itself. And the area is not small. There's 100 kilometers apiece there, which I believe makes it the 5th largest ski area in Italy. And, there's a lot of charm. We're actually staying in a village slightly outside of the ski area, like 5 minutes drive, maybe 10 minutes drive, something like that. And we were skiing midweek, so there are no queues at all, 100 kilometers apiece. Really, no pressure on the lifts at all relative to what you'd expect in France around that time. And just a lot of charm in the area. Anyway, while I was there, I did interview the wonderfully named Bonaventura Margadona, who is president of the Alto Sangro ski area. So let's just have a listen to that.
Generalmente il consorzio ha un volume di affari del ticket che noi paghiamo, non l'indotto. Se moltiplichiamo per 10, il consorzio nella stagione riesce a fare intorno dai 10 ai 13.000 euro, 13 milioni di euro. Se io entro a Monte Pratello, che è molto facile entrare, che c'ha 1 chilometro di strada dalla statale, da lì posso partire e andare su tutto il comprensore. Sì. Però si sta pensando anche perché c'è una volontà del comune di Roccaraso che vorrebbe fare un impianto che arrivi a Pizzano. Sì. Quindi è un altro progetto che in cantiere
potrebbe succedere.
So, he doesn't speak English, but you probably got there that his beautiful sounding Italian told us a number of things, like the size of the resort there, the queues, but also that they've had a big investment in lifts over the last few years. And part of that reason is, their main audience are people coming from Rome and Naples going for skiing there. And so they have a big investment in snow cannons as well. And we touched on snow cannons. They can generate, a huge amount of snow, more than any other resort in Italy. Now, as it was when I was there, skiing was really good. They'd had, like the Alps, a lot of snow just beforehand in mid-January. And the cannons weren't on, the conditions were good, but it was, like Jen said earlier, warming up during half term. And you could kind of see that deterioration over the course of the week. It's going to be fine for a while, but, thinning in a couple of places. But, I really, really enjoyed our trip. I always enjoy going skiing as a family. But, really kind of different kind of option where you could mix in the cultural sides of things as well. So it's in the Abruzzo region of Italy. And if you want to know more about it, just have a Google for Ski Abruzzo. It was actually Fiona who from Ski Abruzzo helped me with those translations from Mr. Margadona. So, that's my trip off the beaten track. Might talk about that at the Birmingham show as well.
What was the snow, what's the altitude like there then? And what were the piste conditions like all over?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. The actual, it's relatively high in terms of the start of the slopes are about 1,300 meters. So comparable, let's say, with, Latania or lower bits of Mirabel, something like that. But it only goes up to 2,100 at the highest point. So it's not a huge vertical drop overall. But the snow conditions, were good. They actually had in those north-facing slopes some really, really good snow. I tried the off-piste and it was a bit windswept. There are a few patches, but when you got that kind of breakable crust, it's not really any good. Most of the week I was skiing on piste.
Yeah, I find that interesting because I think the snow conditions are pretty great on piste around the resorts at the moment. But when I talk to a lot of holiday makers, they are not as positive as I am about the snow conditions because they want that off-piste and that fresh powder. And that's why it's so interesting listening to Mike talk about Japan and how reliable those snow conditions are, and that you could book now for next year and be pretty reassured that you're going to have incredible snow conditions like that. I can just see that so appealing to people.
Yeah, it's tempting for sure, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're looking for. I knew for this holiday, realistically, being with the kids, that we didn't need to go, off-piste. It's on-piste for them. They're kind of, intermediates, advanced intermediates. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it looks very appealing. It's been on my radar for a period of time because with the Six Nations rugby on, depending when it falls and who's playing, my partner and I have been looking to go and see Wales play Italy in Rome and then combine it with a holiday. And rather than travel back up to the Alps, we've looked at that area there and a little bit further north from there, which is the Gran Sasso National Park. And there's a couple of resorts in that area too. And we did it a few years ago where we went to Verona halfway through the holiday because it was over the Easter Sunday. So instead of queuing with everybody else for the weekend, we went to Verona for a couple of days and then came back to the slopes afterwards. So it is a great mix if you can combine a city break with a ski holiday.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, we stayed with friends in Naples for a couple of nights, and they went up to Rome to watch England, Italy. The timings worked out on the weekend that we were leaving. And, you know, in terms of combining things, I mean, my son and I went along to see Napoli play football in the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium on the Sunday night, which is just brilliant. You know, really great way of getting into the local culture. Right, we are the ski podcast and not the rugby podcast, so we're going to move on. I'm just going to briefly mention that I tested and used the Carve for the first time. I've mentioned this before in previous podcasts. The Carve is a device, basically a footbed that goes into your boots and gives you a huge amount of detailed information about your skiing. Now, and I hadn't used it, although I hadn't used it on a couple of my previous trips because I'm mainly ski touring and doing off-piste, but I knew I would be on-piste for this particular trip. And I'm going to discuss that in full detail in the next episode 171, when Al Morgan will be joining us again. But you can have a look on Twitter if you want to see what my scores were, because that was really interesting. Right, we're going to move on briefly to Team GB. Since our last podcast, lots of things have happened. Our bobsleigh team picked up silver in the World Championships, which I think is their first medal since the 1930s. Very encouraging and well done to them. Jasmine Taylor, who's been on the podcast many times before, she is a telemarker. She got her first podium of the season. Charlotte Banks, snowball cross. She got more than one World Cup win in since our last podcast. She was in Cortina, and listener, if you'd like to hear an interview with her, we talked to her back in 2018. So just have a Google for that. We also had World Cup podiums in ski slopestyle for Kirsty Muir and big air for Zoe Atkin over in the States. And World Championships, I mentioned that earlier. Alpine skiing took place in Maribel and Courchevel. There were no medals for Team GB there, but the Freestyle World Championships are taking place right now in Georgia. I'm going to attempt the resort name, Baku Irani. I'm going to try that, Baku Irani in Georgia. Wouldn't surprise me, Mike, if you've been there. Is that right?
I've not been to that particular resort. I've been to Gdauri, which is near Tbilisi, but Georgia's got a number of great mountains and a number of great resorts. Very much worthwhile going.
Excellent. Well, it would be a huge surprise if we didn't, or if Team GB didn't pick up, medals during the rest of the week. I think the main events are starting probably today, or if you're listening to this tomorrow. Right, we're just going to move on to feedback now. I enjoy all feedback about the show. I really like to know what listeners think, and if you have ideas for features, etc. So please contact me on social at The Ski Podcast or via email theskipodcast@gmail.com. I've got a few bits of feedback. Laura Hargrave said, I love the feature on van life in episode 167. Also 167, Ian West said, I love the refuge stay in the Three Valleys. You could tell you enjoyed it. Judy Matthews said, keep the episodes coming. It's a wonderful listen. I've got a few of my friends hooked onto it too. Thanks for that, Judy. If you want to do something to help the show, you can always give us a review on Apple Podcasts. We've actually had 3 more recently. GWRC00 said, love this podcast. Always good to listen to all things ski related throughout the year, especially when the ski holidays seem so far off. Lots of different articles with some really useful and interesting content. Enjoy Ian's hosting and all the guests. Also, there's a great back catalogue to work your way through. Totally recommended. Well, thank you for that 5-star review. It's really appreciated. And as you say, There's a lot of episodes to catch up with. We actually have over 170 now to catch up with. 123 we listened to in the last week. And I had a quick look at where people are listening. Majority of us listeners are in the UK, but we have some in the US, Australia, Canada. But I also noticed on the list Iceland and El Salvador. So if you are our listener or listeners in Iceland and El Salvador, I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe, listener, so you don't miss an episode. Finally, if you enjoy the pod, you can always buy me a coffee. At DWIB said, thanks for doing what you do. It's a highlight of the day when the pod goes up, and very kindly bought me a coffee, which you can do at buymeacoffee.com/the Ski Podcast. Now you can follow me at Skipedia and the podcast at the Ski Podcast on social. But for now, I'd like to thank Les Trois Vallées for sponsoring the show and thank my guest today. Jen, thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to come on and have a chat with you and talk ski, snow, and all things winter.
Excellent. That's brilliant, Jen. And Mike, thank you to you for joining us in Japan. Right, I think we've lost Mike. He's probably been snowed under. So finally, listener, thank you for joining us. And until next time, goodbye.